Hello and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, particularly on a cold January night where snow is threatening. You are wonderful, thank you. We are recording this evening because we are incredibly grateful that we've got Dr Kevin Stannard, who's come down to join us from GDST Trust office in London. Those of you that don't know him, he is our Director of Innovation and Education, which is, I think, one of those wonderful titles that really says a lot about the Girls' Day School Trust. How much importance they place in learning, and in particular in understanding how girls learn. Now, the joy for us as the teachers here, and for you as the parents, is that we don't have to worry about all of that, because every year, it's roughly every year, I think, Kevin, isn't it? We get this great tome, which is all the research that Kevin and his team have been doing about why and how girls thrive in all girls' schools. And that can seem nowadays to be slightly contrary to the messages you get out generally about how you need to mix boys and girls and you're preparing them for the real world, etc. And that's why the talk is so brilliantly titled as it is, The Trouble with Girls. We don't think there's any trouble at all with girls. We love what we do here. And Kevin, I hope, is going to persuade you of the data and the information that's behind why girls learn so well in all girls education. So Kevin, thank you very much. Over to you.
Right, thank you very much, Kate. And it's a real pleasure to be here this evening. I'm going to test this. Yes. Excellent, thank you. Right, now, our four founders, the women that set up the first Girls' Day School Trust schools, including this one, before it merged with another, but the Bath High School, part of the Girls' Day School Trust, 1875. The four founders of our network of schools were genuine radicals. And they may not look like it at first glance, but think about what the educational landscape looked like in the 1870s when they were doing their work of setting up the first girls' high schools. In that decade, the compulsory stage of education in this country ended at 11. If it was there at all, in many parts of the country, there was no compulsory education. But where it was there, it ended at 11. It was highly unusual for girls of any social class to attend a school beyond that age, into their teenage years. It was almost unheard of for women to be involved in higher education at the time. Cambridge, as an example, the first women's colleges, 1869 at Girton, 1872 at Newnham. So women were allowed from that point to attend lectures at Cambridge, as long as they were behind a screen. They weren't allowed to graduate or get degrees. The first year that women were allowed to take degrees at Cambridge University, 1948. That was within my parents' lifetimes. University College London was a little bit more pioneering. They admitted women on equal terms as men from as early as 1878, but not for medicine. Across the pond, Ivy League colleges in the United States were a little bit slower, even slower than British universities. The first year that women were admitted to universities at Princeton and Yale on equal terms with men, 1969. And that's within my lifetime. It's a very, very slow burn. But think about the 1870s. Our founders didn't just set up some schools. They contributed to literally transforming the educational landscape. What they did was pioneering, forward-looking, and still has work to do. But now, 150 years on, what more work is there to do in terms of gender equality and opportunities in education? Girls regularly beat boys at GCSE and A-level in terms of grades. They increasingly dominate in higher education in terms both of participation, enrollments, and also in terms of degree classifications. Over recent decades, education has gone co-ed. Relatively few people now go to single-sex schools. Increasingly, parents who didn't themselves go to single-sex schools are looking at schools like this one and thinking, are they, yeah, effective, but are they quaint? Are they a bit outdated? Are they legacies of an honourable but an earlier age? After all, the world is co-ed. Shouldn't schools reflect that? Even worse, might schools that separate girls from boys actually be doing damage to the students that attend them? Well, that's the view of someone like Richard Cairns, who is head of Brighton College, a very prestigious boys' school that went co-ed in the recent past. You may not be able to read that from where you're sitting. Basically, he said, if girls don't learn to socialise with boys as children, what happens when they go out into the workplace? They may have a clutch of A stars and a first-class degree, but if they can't meaningfully converse and communicate with male colleagues, they'll be at a huge disadvantage. Now, there are a number of possible answers to Richard Cairns' argument. Most of them are really rude, so I'm not going to use those. The best argument, again, you may not be able to read that, so I'm going to read it to you. It is from a Year 12 student from last year in an essay prize competition that we ran in the summer. And one of the questions we asked them was to reflect on their experience of being in an all-girls setting and what they thought it would give them in preparation. And this is an answer which you could almost have asked them basically to respond to Richard Cairns. This is one student's response. An obvious advantage of going to an all-girls school is that it prepares us for later life. While some of us may argue that going to a single-sex school means you forget how to socialise with the other sex, I think this argument is flawed. Just because you go to a single-sex school doesn't mean you do not encounter the other sex in everyday life. It's so easy to think that going to an all-girls school means you will have no male friends, but frankly, this is nonsense. In fact, all-girls schools make us even more prepared for our future of working with male counterparts, because we've been trained to validate our own views so much that we'll undoubtedly challenge gender inequalities. That's an incredibly powerful testimony around single-sex schools that I think adequately answers Richard Cairns. But Cairns's view might hold some water if two things were true. Firstly, if girls' schools really, as he kind of implies, serve as protective bubbles, shielding their pupils from the real world, if that were true, and if the real world was truly gender equal. Now, the Girls' Futures report that I'll refer to in a minute, honestly, I will get to it, proves that a lot still needs to be done to create gender equality in the world and to fulfill our founders' objectives. And also, alongside other evidence that I'll run through very briefly this evening, it shows just how effective schools like this one are in preparing students for, not protecting them from, the real world. Now, the research that we conducted a year ago, or just over a year ago, using an independent research organisation to ask a nationally representative sample of 1,358 girls, questions which elicited responses around their confidence. Confidence in themselves, confidence in the world, confidence in the future of the world, confidence in their role in the future of the world. And although it's a really, really interesting report, I would recommend that you read it carefully because it's really depressing. It's not a really inspiring read for the very simple reason that the results suggest really low levels of confidence among that sample of students of nationally representative across geography, ethnicity, social class. It was a really interesting but worrying picture of low levels of confidence in those sorts of aspects of girls and young women that we were asking from age 9 upwards. That's it. The findings can be compared with a smaller control sample of boys of the same age range. And what that does is allow us to identify not just where girls felt unconfident, but how much less confident they were than boys of the same age groups and the same sort of demography. The findings reveal significant differences between boys and girls across all aspects of confidence. And if you can see the figures, there's a very, very clear, statistically significant difference in the responses between boys and girls. I've just taken a few examples of questions that, and specifically 18, because that's the end of this process. Now, the vast majority of respondents in this survey went to co-ed schools. It's representative in that sense. More than 90% of the respondents went to co-ed schools. Even that set of stats gives the lie to any claim that mixed schools are gender equal. This is the result of an education largely in co-ed schools. Yes, co-ed settings reflect the real world, but they reflect the inequalities and the structural obstacles that exist in the real world. And you could argue that they don't just reflect the real world, but they actually reinforce some of those inequalities, as we'll unpack as we go through. Now, the existence of a significant gender gap in confidence, in attitude, isn't news. I'm not pretending that this is completely new stuff to anyone. We've known about this. We've known about it and talked about it for decades. This confidence gap is very real. It's very well established. It's this, our research isn't giving you anything new in that respect. It's been a topic of academic research for a long time, and the left-hand graphic refers to a classic study in New York University of students doing business management. And they were given 2 biographies of technology entrepreneurs. Their biographies were identical in every respect, in terms of age, in terms of experience, in terms of qualifications. But when in discussion, it became clear that the majority of the students who were taking part in this workshop would really rather work with the one who was a male rather than the female. The only difference between those 2 biographies was one male and one female. And yet there was a significant preference to work with a male. It sounds weird, but it relates very closely to what some people call the Hillary Clinton dilemma, which is that, as lots of research suggests, women find it harder than men to get judged by their peers in workplace situations, to get judged by their peers equally highly on 2 axes, on competence and on likability. It's a genuine problem that besets lots and lots of females in the professional world. This is something which people know about, and it does affect their confidence and their judgments. So this isn't new. What is new is the evidence that we've got that these differences in attitudes and dispositions between boys and girls, men and women, while they're substantial and persistent, are not preordained. They're not dictated by biology. They're not determined by gender. We know this because the same survey that I've just referred to was answered by 3,000 GDST students of the same age range, including many from this school, with dramatically different results. And if, as we'll see, we can get results that show the impact of schools like this on confidence levels, then it begins to change the whole tone of a response to people like Richard Cairns, who try to label schools like this as being out of sync with the times. Now, I'm not going to show you many statistics. They're all in the report. I just want to give you a few sort of headlines and suggest that there is a really interesting pattern. In any of the questions about confidence, and this one is about whether you feel negatively about the future, and I've taken examples from age 9 and age 18, but I'll show you a few others. But the thing to stress is that in each of these, there's a very similar pattern. 3 things stand out. The first is the gender difference, the difference in the length of the bars between boys and girls in the national survey. The second is that on most of these questions, GDST girls track more closely to boys than to the other girls. Their answers are closer to boys in terms of confidence levels than are the national survey of girls. And the third thing, comparing the age 9 with the age 18, is the incredible work that is done in our junior and prep schools across the GDST. There's a lot of thought among parents, quite understandably, if it's very expensive to send children to an independent school, is there value in holding off until a bit later, at age 11, age 13, or whatever? If anything, this research suggests that the earlier the better, because there is an immense amount of work going into building really high levels of confidence in every aspect of the questions being asked of age 9 girls towards the end of their prep school phase, doing really, really great work in building a reservoir of resilience, effectively, that gets tapped, used as you go through the inevitably more challenged teenage years. Confidence levels in general drop. They drop faster for women than men. But the support that's provided by junior and prep schools like these has a huge amount of impressive sort of foundation. As you go through examples, I'm comfortable taking risks. Same basic pattern. It's all in the report, but it's the pattern that I want to really stress. Confidence talking to people with different views. This is girls aged 9. Again, very similar pattern. A gender difference, a GDST difference comes out very clearly. Same question for age 18 girls. This is the one question which actually gets better results as you go through the teenage years. Girls aged 18 tend to be a little bit more confident about, or feel more confident, talking to people, challenging people with different views. But the gender difference is still very, very stark. This is one that's really, really scary. And I think, again, it suggests a real problem with a co-ed setting, where most of these respondents in the national survey come from. This is something about what we call the stereotype threat. This is where someone adjusts their interests, their activities, their hobbies, their choices of subjects at school because of the fear that they'll be judged by the choice they make. Are some subjects seen predominantly as male subjects in schools? Even if you're only looking at the number of boys compared with girls that take them up, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Are some hobbies going to be looked at a bit suspiciously if you're a girl who wants to take them up? Interestingly, boys are very prone to this as well. Boys will adjust their activities, their interests, their hobbies out of fear of criticism from peers, from parents, family, whatever. It's a very real threat, and it comes out very starkly here. But what also comes out very starkly is the GDST effect that almost inoculates students from making those choices that are against their own interests and their own activities. Again, it's a big indictment of co-ed settings, which really, when it comes down to it, are co-ed only in the sense that they've got roughly the same number of boys and girls. These figures do not suggest a co-ed sort of equality of opportunity in many schools, where girls particularly are adjusting their behaviours, dropping subjects at key points because of fear of being judged negatively. Okay, so those are the stats, and I'll say a little bit more about them in a minute, but I want to just go back just briefly to the more kind of qualitative evidence. Behind the statistics are the real experiences of the students in schools like this. And I just wanted to pick out 3 Year 12 girls from the summer, again, reflecting on their experience in a single-sex setting. My GDST school has given me confidence to be me and to venture out of my comfort zone in ways that I wouldn't have if I was at any other school. When women come together, they have more capacity for academic potential as we become each other's cheerleaders, role models, therapists, and best friends. This will be the legacy I bring with me into my adult life. I will forever find strength in the women around me. Not only is that a fantastically strong testament, it's brilliant punctuation. I think any English student should be really proud of that. The lasting legacy for me of having attended a girls' school is a sense of community and confidence in how powerful and caring a group of girls can be without the fear of judgment. That's what lies behind those sort of bare statistics. Now, I just want to give another, just very brief shout out to girls' school, to the junior and the prep schools that do such fantastic work in producing this kind of reservoir of resilience that can be called on as they go through the sort of teenage tunnel. This matters because we know that many choices and dispositions and attitudes and behaviours are already crystallised by the time they reach the end of that phase. And damage can be done in terms of doors being closed, choices being sort of cut off that you can't go back on. And from the national kind of research around the importance of this phase, I just want to pick out just 4 things that struck me as really important. Things which are true of the national picture for girls, but which are absolutely not true of girls in schools like this. 2/3 of girls nationally give up physical activity completely by the age of 9. By the age of 9, girls' performance in maths is systematically underestimated by teachers and parents compared with that of boys. If you think that's weird, I don't know whether some of you might be able to remember a notorious statement by Catherine Birbalsingh, who was the Commissioner for Social Mobility a few years ago, who claimed when she was talking to a select committee in Parliament, she claimed that actually we shouldn't really be worried that so few girls and young women stick with science and maths, STEM subjects, drop them as early as possible, and don't tend to go on to university. So we shouldn't be too worried, because we all know that girls often find maths really hard in junior school and give it up. Really? From age 6, there are gendered notions of brilliance already in evidence among children and, depressingly, among parents and even teachers. We know that because the research shows that people are still very prone, typically, to fall back on the old kind of generalization that if a boy does well in something, it's because he's brilliant. If a girl does well in something, it's most likely because they work really hard. Now, girls' self-image is subject to influences from marketing and merchandising that still, depressingly, has that kind of sense of putting people into particular sort of pink and blue routes. And we might think that we've moved on from that. And there was a study done, and yes, people do get paid to do some research like this. This was a study by 2 academics of the last 10 years of Disney and Pixar animated films, looking at the representation of genders, females in particular. And yes, things have improved. It is no longer the case that the leading actress in, or the leading character in a Disney and Pixar film is actually asleep for most of the film. They are more engaged. There is greater gender equality. But when you sit a small child in front of a TV to watch even the more modern Disney and Pixar films, be aware that even in the more recent ones, it is still the case that girls are more likely to receive compliments based on their appearance compared with boys who receive compliments based on their skills. Female characters appear disproportionately polite. Female characters are more likely to apologize for events outside their control. Yeah, this isn't really sort of hard-edged sort of gender discrimination, but it's subtle and it's insidious and it's still there structurally. And the Girls' Futures research, I think, is the final piece in a jigsaw that we started building some years ago of evidence about girls' schools and their relevance. What it shows is that for whatever reason, schools like this make a difference. They turn the dial. They create a statistically significant difference, not just in academic results, but in aspects of character and confidence. They make a difference. But all they show is that they do make a difference for whatever reason. Earlier research, and Kate mentioned the compilation that we try to keep up to date of all the evidence of how schools like this work, kind of identified the characteristics of schools like this that created that difference that's been seen in the Girls' Futures report. And what's really interesting, I think, about this is that, yes, it's possible to visit a school or to look at a school and to pick out individually really outstanding things about it. It might be fantastic results in particular subjects, it might be a particular sort of sporting prowess or whatever. But what really turns the dial is the fact that the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. What always impresses me when I visit schools like this is that from the moment you go into the reception, you're hit by what is effectively an ecology in a school. It is the fact that everything is working towards the same aim of the development of girls and young women. It's unspoken in many cases, and it's not just the teachers, it's the whole of the staff, it's everybody involved in supporting the girls and the young women in a school like this. It's the whole package. You could say it's 3 C's. Yes, it's what goes on in the classroom, and we can unpack that a little bit in a minute. It's the curriculum, it's the choice of subjects, and the evidence of the fact that schools like this absolutely unhinder girls in choices of science subjects, maths, leading to engineering and computing and whatever. It's participation in sport, not just winning stuff and being in elite teams, but just as part of the routine, the natural life of young people, being involved in the physical exercise. It's the culture, it's the role modeling that isn't contrived, which is trying to make a point. It's just there in their blood. It's the leadership opportunities. Everything adds up to an ecology which is basically fitting the objectives of our founders. And all of it, I think, just reinforces the single point that I would want to make, I think, in this sort of setting. And that is that girls' schools are single-sex by design. They were set up for girls only. Co-ed schools are mixed by accident or exigency. You look back at the history of boys' schools that went co-ed, and it's either because they were running out of money or because they were not high enough in the league tables. They wanted to get rid of the thick boys and replace them with bright girls. There is very little of an educational explanation as to why they go co-ed. Sometimes they try and give it a little bit of a spin. Eltham College in London, when it went co-ed, the head was at least honest in saying that the main reason why we're introducing girls, he said, was to civilize the boys. And that does actually go back to the original Yale and Princeton. In their arguments for going co-ed in the 1960s, it was said that it would be a better balance of social and intellectual life, presumably for the men at the university. The girls' interests are not taken into account when the school goes co-ed. It's purely rationalization, it's economics, it's getting the school into a stronger position. Schools like this are designed as single-sex schools, and everything sings to that hymn sheet. And we know that despite what people like Richard Cairns try to claim, we know that there's still an awful lot of work to do. And the latest version of the research compilation really picks out a lot about STEM participation, about sports participation, and depressingly too, although we don't headline it because it is just depressing, but it's real, and it is the continuing evidence of routine sexual harassment that takes place in many co-ed schools. Now, our earlier research that we did suggested that if you talk to teachers in schools like this, they won't admit to doing things differently because they're teaching girls. There is no kind of pseudo-scientific sense that we have that girls learn differently, girls need different handling. No, it's not as sort of blatant as that. There's a nuance in teachers' responses to classes which are girls only. And those nuances are around curriculum content. It might be the choice of the text in literary subjects. It might be the balance between practical and theoretical treatments of science subjects, for instance. It's in the structure of lessons, the degree to which signposting and scaffolding are used. And it's in classroom dynamics. It's in, for instance, the teacher's kind of imperative objective of making sure that everyone contributes and people do not simply sit there quietly, letting the noisier ones take over, and not wanting to answer unless you've got the exact right answer. And it's a problem that teachers in schools like this talk about a lot, and that is how you deal with perfectionism, how you encourage girls to take intellectual risks and learn through making mistakes. And it doesn't come easy to many people, particularly more able students. And it's something that, because it's a single-sex school, can have a kind of laser-like focus on the development of students in that position. But it's also even more basic than that. It gives teachers and students space to do things simply in the absence of boys. All the research tells us that you put boys in a classroom and they take up more time. They simply fill the space. Lots of evidence that teachers, with the best will in the world, often use the girls in their classes to police the behavior of the boys. Okay, it might work if the overall imperative is to keep the boys engaged. Why should the girls be in that position? Why should they be recruited in that particular role? Their interests should be paramount. And in schools like this, it is. I'm not going to say much about this, but schools like this are also well aware that the key problem is in Key Stage 4. It's the GCSE years. And I won't unpack this, but I'm just to reassure you, even in schools like this, there are confidence challenges around getting students, very often the most able and the most conscientious ones, through the tunnel of GCSE. And schools like this do everything they possibly can to encourage students not just to think about exam results alone as being the outcome that they're looking for. To the last 2 years, many girls in schools like this feel the need to get a couple of years co-ed experience under their belts before university. It's a kind of, it's a fear that they have. They go to university, and it'll be the first time they're in a co-ed environment. What will be different? How will it change? They need to go and get a bit of experience. There's also the kind of grass is greener feeling that people often have, particularly if they've been through sort of the junior years as well in a school. It's understandable. What it misses is the very clear advantages of single-sex settings in the sixth form of schools like this. And it's the things that can be added in those 2 years that are absolutely crucial to consider. Now, I won't go into detail about that, except to say that the final bit of data that I want to show you is from the Girls' Future Report that suggests there is a real danger in losing those last 2 years where you could gain so much. This is wanting to work in a leadership position. GDST girls and boys, there's not much change through the years in terms of their response. There's still, it's quite low, it's surprisingly low. But then again, look at our leadership models, particularly girls looking at leadership models of people like Putin, Trump, Johnson. So it's not surprising that it's low, but look at the leadership sort of preference for girls in stark decline, continuing into the sixth form years. And it continues into higher education too. There's an anecdote that I often think about, certainly when I see statistics like this. It's from a couple of years ago at a conference when a head from the Hewitt School in Manhattan, Tara Christie Kinsey, spoke. And she'd been dean at Princeton. And she said that when she was at Princeton, the confidence levels of the female undergraduates on the whole fell over the 4 years. Now that isn't a huge advert for Princeton, I guess, but it's true. And actually Oxford University's Career Service did a similar study and found the same thing, that female confidence among undergraduates fell during their period. That they arrived more confident than they left. Tara said with two exceptions. One was elite sportswomen, and you could understand the kind of support that they'd get, the reason why they would continue to sort of benefit from high confidence levels. The other exception was undergraduates who'd gone to girls-only schools. They were kind of inoculated against that overall declining confidence. So the kind of sense that you have to get that experience before going to university almost begs the question. It's the more time you spend in a co-ed school, it would seem, the more time you spend in a girls-only school, it would seem, would provide you with enough of a foundation to get you through higher education and grow in confidence rather than decline. And as I wind up, I just want to make a few general points about how the research fits in with our kind of vision of what we want our girls to do and to be as they leave schools like this. Two American writers, Whitney Johnson and Tara Moore, wrote a few years before COVID a really stimulating and challenging piece about how actually schools don't necessarily do girls justice when they give them prizes and merits for conforming. What they suggested schools like ours should be doing, and we are doing, is challenging around these 5 points. Figure out how to challenge influence and authority. It's not always comfortable in a school when you get students questioning why things are done, but it's absolutely crucial, and it's part of the lifeblood of a school like this. This school develops students who will talk back in a constructive and polite way, but they will challenge, and rightly so. Prepare, but also learn to improvise. Dealing with the challenges of life is not the same as dealing with an exam, and preparing for that is different. And that's, again, what schools like this go well beyond. They transcend the preparation for exams. I'm struck by an example of one GDST school where the students were in a final of a debating society against a prestigious all-boys school. And they went to the debate and they thought they nailed it. They prepared to within an inch of its life. They absolutely focused for days on preparation. They gave a faultless performance. The boys rocked up as if they hadn't prepared anything, and it was all very fun, and they won. And the girls went back and they were just devastated by this. But the school's response wasn't to sort of complain and say, this is outrageous. They said, right, we've got to work on this. We need to prepare you not just for exams, we need to prepare you for basically flexibility, adaptability, being able to cope in that sort of situation. So they got a group of stand-up comics to do workshops on improv. That's the kind of thinking that produces girls from schools like this. Well, find effective forms of self-promotion. And for me, that means thinking about my experience. My former life, when I taught at Eton College, I was responsible for higher education applications. So every year I'd read about 270 of the upper six personal statements for UCAS. And I'd have to reject several tens of them because they lied. These are boys who are entitled in several senses, and they just thought it was okay just to make outrageous claims about what they did. Contrast that with the experience of, that's reported to me by colleagues in schools like this, heads of six, heads of HE preparation, whatever, who are helping the students to prepare for university application and finding it actually quite difficult to get them to be honest and to big themselves up in absolutely appropriate ways. It's a completely different area of activity. Welcome less prescribed career path, yes. Go for being respected, not just liked. So we're back to the Hillary Clinton problem. These are the sorts of qualities which schools like this work on, in addition to the given of academic excellence. And these are absolutely crucial in what the girls and young women are going to find when they leave school. Final challenge, other than those 5, since discussing the research that we've been sort of unpacking, some pushback has been from colleagues who've said, well, this is all fine, but are we really proposing that the solution is for girls to be more like boys? Do we just want the girls, all girls, just to respond like boys to all of these questions? Isn't that missing the point? Well, it is actually. It is, and it's a fair question. And so what I think Marissa Porges, who's head of another US school, has put forward is a definition of leadership, which is actually much more nuanced and much more appropriate for the kinds of students that we produce. This is someone who was an ex-US Navy pilot, a former national security advisor in Obama's White House, now the principal of a girls' school in Philadelphia. And her definition of leadership involves, competition, assertiveness, but also collaboration, empathy, adaptability. And that, again, is the sort of thing that is meat and drink to students and their enrichment programs at schools like this. Now, a few years ago, just before COVID, we used to run a summer conference in London, a GDST summer conference. And one year, we tried to put forward this vision of basically schools as subversive organizations, communities, disrupting gender stereotypes. We were accused of putting forward a Centrinian's theory of education. That was quite good, actually. Not a bad thing to be aiming for. So finally, I want to wrap up by just reminding you that I think the main point about all of this seems to be that girls' schools, are single-sex by design. And that purpose for which they were set up and designed remains valid. Far from being quaint or quirky outliers, girls' schools are a necessary and an indispensable part of the modern educational landscape for the very same reasons that our founders set out 150 odd years ago. Now, that's the final quote from one of the girls in the essay prize competition. The privilege of learning within a liberal, female-centered school is unrivaled. Our students recognize the immense privilege of attending a girls-only school. Problem is, very few students in this country get that privilege. There aren't many state girls' schools, there aren't many independent girls' schools anymore. Most girls go to co-ed schools. I guess the question that I'd pose at the end is, who's advocating for them? And I think as a charity, as an organization of schools that have shown and continue to show the importance of this kind of environment, our job is partly to deliver that. It's also to speak up for girls and young women in co-ed environments, to make them, their institutions, raise their game in terms of the provision they make for girls and young women. Thank you. Now, I want you to see all of that really just as the kind of warm-up for the main event, which is two students, ex-students, who are going to just briefly tell you whether they think they recognize any of that in what they experience. We can tell you about the research. We can bang the drum. I can tell you anecdotes. The best evidence is the products of schools like this and the reflections of students who've been through and are going through. So I'd like to welcome 2 speakers, Anya and Poppy. They're both English literature majors. Anya has been at the Royal High School since year 7. She's now in year 13, and she's just received an offer from Lincoln College to read English at Oxford next year. Poppy, also an English major, left Royal High in 2021 and is currently in her 3rd year at Cardiff University. And I think Anya is going to come up and talk to us first, but I'd just like you to welcome Anya and Poppy. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Anya. I joined Royal High in year 7, and I'm currently in year 13 studying my A-levels. I think Royal High truly has been the best place for me, and the all-girls environment is one which I personally have found incredibly beneficial. I think the greatest strength is in the classroom dynamic. I used to be really shy in my primary school. It was co-ed, and so being given that space here where people don't interrupt or speak over one another was incredibly valuable to me. It was an opportunity to learn about my own voice and to learn to trust it and to be confident in it without any fear of judgment. And I think that's prepared me for the future really well. I understand that the best ideas don't have to be shouted out, but also that in wider society, sometimes speaking a little louder is what the room requires of you. So I'm leaving school with the ability to navigate both of those situations. There's also no bias regarding subject choices here, which is really nice. There's no sense of a girl or boy's subject at GCSE, and that attitude grows with us into sixth form, where STEM is just as popular as the arts, both at A-level and IB. There are girls in my year currently receiving offers to study everything from computer science to history and Portuguese. I'd like to specialise in medieval literature, or one of my friends is hoping to get involved in artificial intelligence, and so that diversity is incredibly refreshing to be around. I really don't feel limited by other people's expectations of me, and that really extends sort of beyond the classroom too. One of my fondest memories was in year 8 when my friends and I got to play rugby at Twickenham Stadium during half-time of a Bath versus Bristol rugby match. And it's things like that which I don't believe I would have had the chance to do at a co-ed school. The friendships which I've made here are also unmatched, and I think people tend to assume it will be quite cliquey at an all-girls school. But particularly in sixth form, it's so incredibly integrated in terms of your lessons, the clubs you attend, whether you take IB or A-level, student leadership team and tutor groups, that everyone really knows everyone, and friendship operates more as sort of like an overarching value of the school rather than anything else. The other thing I think people worry about is not being able to socialise with boys as a result of going to an all-girls school. I can say for me personally, it hasn't been a problem at all. Just by playing sport at my local clubs or getting involved in extracurricular events that the school facilitate, like Bath Youth Parliament or Model UN, it ensures that you're constantly meeting and engaging with others. And Bath is also generally very connected in terms of inter-school relations among young people. So it's really difficult to feel isolated because friendships web from school to school and then through mutual friends really easily. I can honestly say that I'm proud of who I've become here, and I'm grateful to the school and the all-girls environment for teaching me not to fear pushing boundaries. I know whatever waits for me next year will be equally as exciting as a result. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Poppy. I was a student here in 2014 to 2021, so my whole of secondary and sixth form experience was at this school. I have so much praise to give to the school for so many different reasons, and I'm not going to go into every single little detail, but I have 2 things that I would say captured my time here, the first of which was the sport. I'm a hugely sporty person. I was when I joined. I was a chatty little loudmouth, quite loud in year 7 to year 9. I knuckled down in year 10, but the sport here was where I really thrived. It was where I really found myself. I played pretty much everything that you could have possibly imagined. Netball was probably more of my strength here than anything else, but give me anything for athletics, cross country, and I would always give it a go. I was never pushed away. And then in year 11, I found my love for rugby, which is something I continue to pursue and something I still do at university now. I'm in first team Bucks Super Rugby, which is an incredible achievement, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without my environment here. The GDST gave me the opportunity to come to this school, actually giving me a 90% bursary, which was a huge opportunity for me, and I cannot thank them enough. It was absolutely an incredible experience, and I definitely would not be where I am today without it. My time here was incredible. I loved every single second of it. The sixth form was where I really felt like home. It was like a sort of second place of comfort for me, other than outside of my home environment. If ever you need anything, anyone would be there for you. That's pretty much all I capture in my time at school. The big question, I went to university and I said, I went to an all-girls private school, and the stereotype is, you must have been really anti-boy, you weren't involved, you weren't conversational. Actually, the majority of my friends outside school were boys. They all went to Beach and Cliff. They are still my closest mates now. And through actually the Enterprise Day in year 8, that's where I found them. So it was this school that facilitated that friendship. Thanks for that. No, it hasn't hindered me in any way. I had a job at 15. I was interacting with boys on a daily basis. It hasn't hindered me in any way. If anything, it found me a place to thrive, to avoid that contact on a 9-to-5 basis or a 9-to-4 basis. I'd be in the classroom, I'd be focused on my own thing, my own studies, whatever I wanted to achieve. Yeah, I just want to thank so much for having me this evening and for everything that I've achieved because of this school.
Well done, Poppy. The first conversation with Poppy was during lockdown. You used to come into the library, didn't you, religiously, because you had a key worker in your family. And it was just that. It was about rugby. And I thought, yet again, what a great school. There's no sense of this is for girls, this is for boys. Everything is open. And that has made you the leader that you're going to be as well, Poppy, which was wonderful. Thank you very much to Dr Kevin Stannard for his talk. What I'm going to do now is invite some of our guests, our key speakers, up to join us at the front. Claire Lilly, who's the head of prep school, Luke Benedict, who's the head of sixth form, and Poppy and Anya, if you can join us as well for our Q&A session, please. Right, this is when it's over to you, as the audience. We've intentionally made this a question and answer because you've heard the information now, and in your minds, you're probably thinking, well, what about this school for my daughter, either now or in the future? And this is our opportunity to really drill down on that and understand how that GDST difference is brought to life in everything we do every day for the girls here. So I'll start. Does anybody have any burning questions where they really want to just put that out there now before they forget it? Yes, there is a hand right at the back. So.
Not to shout. Sorry, I had one question on the data. So you're comparing GDST girls against co-ed schools. Was that population from independent schools or state schools?
That's a good opportunity just to make a few points about the comparison, because I think the short answer to your question is that what we compare it with was a nationally representative survey. So it had the proportion of people who went to independent schools that go to independent schools in the country, which is, I think, around 7-8%. So in that sense, the next question really is it fair to make that comparison? To be absolutely honest, if we were to find a comparison group that were comparable in socioeconomic group, in geography, whatever, I think the gap would be smaller, to be absolutely honest with you. I don't think it would be insignificant, though, because if you think about the GDST sample, 2 of the 25 schools in that sample, the 2 biggest schools in that sample, are actually state academies on Merseyside. A large proportion of the students in the GDST sample are on various forms of financial support, bursaries and scholarships. I think it's fair to say, talking to colleagues around our schools, they kind of are depressed by the perception from outside the system that schools like this are just basically just reek of privilege. I know, we all know, that a lot of parents at schools like this absolutely make major sacrifices to get to send their children to schools like this. They are not sort of from central casting, from sort of private, privileged educational backgrounds. The other point that I make is all of the qualitative things that I picked out and read from that essay competition, they're all bursary holders. The competition is for our bursary holding students. So for all of those reasons, I think it's fair to make the comparison, although I think your point is absolutely right. The gap would be narrower if we were comparing like with like. The final question that's part of that kind of group of methodological questions, I think, is the question is, well, would the results be very similar if we compare GDST with co-ed schools with the same kinds of backgrounds? My response to that is, well, prove it. The challenge will be for co-ed schools to prove that their girls have the same levels of competence. I haven't seen that research. And I know from talking to many colleagues in schools like that, they have real problems about getting that gender balance. And when girls do leave schools like this for an extra 2 years of sixth form in a co-ed, you often find them coming back and saying, well, yeah, they're co-ed, but they're really just boys' schools with some girls in. So I think there's all sorts of reasons why the core of this research brings up challenges which I think are absolutely valid.
Thank you. Just looking at the information that Kevin shared with us, it was very much focused on that journey. that journey of girls from what we call here, I think Linda used to call them lifers, didn't you? The cradle to the grave, starting us in nursery and taking us all the way through to the sixth form A-level IB. But I think one of the main questions a lot of parents asked, and Kevin, you touched on it, was it's that investment up front at prep level. Is it worth it for girls? And this is why I'd like to ask Claire, your view really on all girls at a very young age. What's the benefit you're actually seeing in the prep school here?
Well, I think the prep school is absolutely, the prep years are crucial in laying those fundamental foundations to build on for the success going forward. I think you've seen that a GDST girl has a strong sense of self in our two excellent speakers this evening. And they have a confidence without an air of arrogance, and I think that's a really delicate balance. And that comes from ethos, and I think that comes from the GDST ethos, it comes from the ethos of the GDST school that they attend. And I think it's about an ethos that puts the girls at the heart of every decision that's made. I think it's an ethos that ensures that every girl's voice is heard. And I think it's an ethos that ensures that every girl's opinion is valued. And I think the girls have their eyes open to a wealth of possibilities. In the prep, it's a time to light fires of imagination and to spark curiosity and to distill a thirst of knowledge as they embark on a holistic approach to learning and to all the wonderment that comes with that. And I think as they go through that, they start to realise how empowered they are in their learning. I think a GDST classroom is very much characterised by collaboration and by that pupil-led discussion. I often talk to parents about how teachers are facilitators. That's the best way to be, rather than being the sage on the stage or the guide on the side. And that gives a huge wealth of knowledge and excitement to the children. If learning can't be exciting in the prep phase, when can it be? Sorry, I don't mean to. It can be throughout the whole thing. Yeah, I know. It can be really exciting throughout, but if you capture it then, half the battle is done. They're excited about what they're doing. They want to do it. They've got a huge thirst for knowledge. And I think it's really important. I think as a result of that sense of belonging, they're more empowered, they're less inhibited, they're more willing to take risks, to put themselves out of their comfort zone. And they know that there's a gentle hand along the side to pick them up and support them if they falter, and to help them to go on a new path of discovery and finding a different way to get to the outcomes they want. So that's definitely what we see in the prep.
So you're seeing that transformation even at that young age.
Mm-hmm. If
you
you get it right there, the rest is a green.
Now, Poppy and Anya, you joined us into the senior school. So I'd be interested, and this is particularly pertinent because at the moment I'm meeting all the year sixes who are hoping to come here next year, and they each come and chat to me and they give me a little presentation of what they're really passionate about. It's great fun, some bizarre things. You never know what's going to come through the door. That's what I love. Every girl is different. But also I say to them, so why do you want to come to the senior school? Why do you want to come to the Royal High? And again, the questions have certain themes to them, and boys do feature quite often. Now, I know it was a long time ago, but can you think back to what it was with you when you came to the Royal High School, what it was that attracted you to join a senior school?
For myself, it was the sport was the big main attraction. My sister went here, she joined in Year 9, so I already knew the environment was nice. She was quite a bit older than me, so she'd been here for a couple of years by the time I was joining, and she thrived in this environment, so I wasn't worried about that necessarily. I guess in terms of when I went back after my interview here to primary school, and everyone was like, oh, why would you go to an all-girls school? I guess I didn't really have any answers to the questions. My mum was a huge guidance in that, but for all the right reasons. But my big one was the sport. I came for a sort of like open trial sport day, and it was great. And I knew that I was going to have every opportunity that I would have, as that was sort of my big passion at that point in my life.
It's interesting there, Poppy, your point about with a bit of guidance from your parents. And this is why events like this are so important, because increasingly our children, they are very empowered. They have strong feelings and they have very clear sense of what's best for them. But actually, as parents, what we see is much more that holistic picture of this stepping stone and what's next and what's next. And I think having those conversations with your daughter to help her understand, yes, but this is what you're getting here, and this is what you were saying, Poppy, not just the sport, but everything else is as important as what your daughters are feeling, that working together. Tanya, what made you choose the Royal High School?
Well, we lived in a different area, and so when we moved to Bath, we had a look around all of the local schools. My parents were fond of the idea of an all-girls school. Like I said, I was quite shy in primary school, and so I think when we first came to see the school, it was that sort of impression that all of the girls were encouraged to very much engage with the world outwardly and honestly, and they really liked that, and so did I. And it wasn't sort of anything that I'd been introduced to before, and so for me, it had a very different vibe to the other schools, and one which I think was incredibly beneficial to where I was at as a person at the time.
So that recognition
Yeah.
you knew you would get and the opportunities. And actually that vibe is an interesting point again, because we talk a lot to the girls and to parents about making sure that the school you're at feels right for your daughter. And something we've learned so much here is for the girls to really thrive, and I wonder if this is more so with girls and boys, Kevin, you might have a view on this. They need to be happy. They need to feel settled, because that confidence comes with that. And that's when they take risks. That's when they seize the opportunities. And we see that over and over here, where we're saying to them, go on, give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? And in fact, this term, our value, is about being fearless, about encouraging the girls to be brave. And we started the year with saying, go on, how are you going to step out of your comfort zone? What clubs are you going to try? What clubs are you going to run? What opportunities will you say yes to? And it's encouraging that we see the difference. And from that comes the happiness, from that comes the learning. Has there been research on that, Kevin?
I think there is a gender difference. I'm really struck by Anya's point about sort of starting the journey fairly introverted and shy. And that immediately gives rise to the challenge that we have, which is that a lot of perceptions of girls' schools is that they kind of act as bubble wrap. And you could imagine someone joining something like that and never getting out of that shell. But you've described a school in which it wasn't bubble wrap, it was challenge, but it was creative, constructive challenge. It was high challenge and low threat. And you put it into, I mean, your example is a really great one of starting that process of coming out of that, but in a really constructive way. And that's the job of a school like this, is to take those raw materials, whether it's that starting point or a predisposition towards to sort of sport without boundaries and things, and really give it support, give it structure, but give it challenge as well. And that there are gender differences in the way that people are predisposed to behave in those ways, but schools like this are so well designed because they can be focused on just those sorts of requirements.
Thank you. So we've talked about the prep school, we've talked about what it was like joining the senior school. If we then project forward, Luke, to the sixth form side of things, that is often a discussion we're having is, okay, we need to now prepare for the real world. We need to move on from single sex. What's your experience of the girls here in the sixth form?
I thought you'd never ask.
Over to you.
Mrs. Reynolds say vibes this evening. This is a huge night.
Shocking.
If I might start, was it Mr. Gunson floating in the dark as a silhouette? Hello, good evening. I think I'm not a stats man. That's not my area of expertise in any way. So I'll give you a pure anecdote, having come from a co-ed school and joined the Royal High School Bath and seen sixth formers operate in a classroom and being profoundly bowled over in my first week. A very genuine, kind of visceral memory 5 years ago. By their authentic selves, they were funny and they were challenging academically and excitingly. I'd never had a girl in a classroom challenge my reading of a poem, and it happened on day 2 here. It was outrageous. I think I was more nervous than they were. But it was brilliant, and therefore that sort of low threat, high challenge, that sense of, it's not conforming to gender tropes of sort of gentility and tranquility. It's quite the opposite. It's a space to be safely fierce, and I think fiercely safe. And it's funny, and when I reflect on my journey into a GDST school, speaking to colleagues at my old school, why I was joining an all-girls school, sort of perhaps similar societal archetypes and assumptions. And it's funny to sign up for an organisation who you fundamentally hope will be rendered obsolete at some point in the future. But we are, I think, 140 years from financial gender equity, and God knows how far from that dissolving in terms of kind of paternalistic structures of society. So the mission is never, I think it's actually in some sense greater than it ever once was. From a sixth form perspective, our girls are now digital natives. They grow up in a world of online ferocity. We know, therefore, the manner in which gender is playing out online is not a healthy role model for them to be immersed in, and they are immersed in it, however much we try to help them not to be. So the mission in that regard, I think, has only become almost more important than in 1940 and 1960, thinking about waves of feminism. I feel like even in my just 10 years in teaching, the need for that all-girls arsenal and weaponry to then go out into the workplace, into university, has never been greater. If I think about how that plays out in my immediate context in the sixth form, watching girls do mentoring is profoundly impressive. The bond and rapport and nurture they can create. I'm thinking of our Year 12s with the Mental Health Foundation programme, or our Year 13 mentors going into Year 7, 8 and 9. And the bonds they manage to create without any sense of embarrassment about being passionate and inspiring to younger girls in that environment is amazing. I think about the chaos of house dance and drama that I just don't think could exist in a co-educational setting. The risk-taking and openness to be silly and brilliant is profoundly amazing to witness, I think. Leadership-wise, what you spoke to about that, I forget her name, but that the headmistress formerly of the Navy and Obama's administration. What an unimpressive human she is. But speaking to what leadership looks like in the context of contemporary femininity, and if I do an assembly before we launch the leadership model each year with Year 12, where they have an ability to kind of project keywords on the screen behind me based on what I'm saying, and the biggest words on that word cloud are always empathy and active listening, and words you don't get if you ask boys what leadership looks like. And that's sort of really interesting to me too. And then again, anecdotally speaking to girls who go off to university, and funnily enough, they're not terrified to be in a seminar with a couple of boys. They're actually massively empowered to be, of course, empathetic and sensitive, but we don't breed overly confident, kind of arrogant women. But women who are sort of unapologetically kind of proficient and capable, who seem to adapt amazingly well to next steps. We get to see them each December at the sort of alumni drinks or whatever it might be. They stay in touch by email because it's that kind of community where that relationship is so strong and so kind of mutually respectful. That makes it kind of very exciting. And I guess the privilege of my role is I get to inherit the foundation that you lay and the wonders of what happens throughout up to this position. And I think I remember you talking, Kevin, in my about third week at the GDST school I came to see speak in London, and you talked about that sixth form experience being that final layer of sort of that final layer of the superpower, the icing on the cake or whatever mixed metaphor you'd like me to use this evening. But fundamentally, without it, the mission dissolves a little bit. And there are cracks, there are Achilles' heel. And it's that final calcification of that superpower, I think, in those last 2 years.
Thank you very much, Luke. So some thoughts from what it's like in the sixth form, what it's been like as students. Just before we hand back to the audience for some of your questions that now you'll be burning to ask. Your sixth form experience, they were very different. I know yours was in lockdown quite a lot, and you've had very different experiences, but how would you say the expectations have been met? What's the reality been? And second part of the question, how's that compared to your friends maybe who've gone to other schools?
That's quite a hard question. In terms of the expectation of our sixth form, do you mean? I guess I didn't really have huge expectation in terms of difference to the senior school. I actually applied for my 3 choice of subjects and I got given them, and then on GCSE results day we had a meltdown and it had to be a change of subjects, and I got my GCSE results back and I got my English remarked, and that was what I wanted to do. It was in the same block as PE, and I was in Miss Hollingsworth's office. I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know which subject to take. I want to take both. I have to take both. Otherwise I will be leaving. And I had an offer from Beecham Cliff, and I went and viewed the school, and I was so in two minds. And I went and I sat in Mr. Moll's office, and we created my own personal timetable to fit both subjects in. And I think without that 2-hour meeting, I probably wouldn't even be here today. I wouldn't be at Cardiff. I wouldn't be anywhere near in the situation that I am in now. The sixth form is a completely different experience to the senior school, both great for different reasons, but the sixth form really is like a home. I cannot capture the experience of those 2 years, but even during lockdown, I guess maybe it was a little bit more casual because obviously we had to be in separate like rooms to year 12 and when I was in year 13, and we played cards but it is the nicest environment that I think I've ever been in. University isn't even the same as that. Like halls aren't the same. That sixth form environment, that sofa area, that kitchen is just so nice. It's so homely.
And the library, Poppy, and the study. Am I on?
It became more integrated in year 13, let's be real, the library. But yeah, absolutely, that sixth form is something really, really special. And those that left, I think, only regretted it. One of my friends who went to the senior school here, she went to a school, sixth form in Chippenham, and as much as she did well and she's now thriving, she's at university, but I just don't think she had the experience that I had. I come home every day and I was always smiling. There was always joy on my face. There was something that I learned. There was something that I enjoyed in my day. And I just don't think you quite can capture that in words, but that's just the experience that I had in the sixth form. It was just completely different.
Very interesting. Thank you, Poppy. And Anna, what's your experience been?
Yeah, I think Poppy is suitably enthusiastic there. It is a really amazing place, and I chose to stay for a mix of two reasons. The first being that I had a really positive experience with the senior school, and the second that I looked around the sixth form and I knew that it was sort of on the same level as the senior school, but with even more opportunities to sort of develop into your own person. And I think that that was incredibly exciting. And I had the opportunity to seize all of those, which was even better. And so it's just, you can sort of pack your week full of absolutely everything from all sort of corners of the curriculum and beyond. And so I really enjoyed the sixth form so far. And I'm still enjoying it as a place where, like Poppy said, it's an incredible community that feels like a second home and a family in itself, but B, somewhere which you can really challenge yourself and really see sort of the parameters go beyond where you thought that they were. And you can get involved in things that you didn't even know were there to get involved with, which is really exciting.
Thank you very much. Again, that confidence and just that natural side of things, which is so important with girls, that they can just be themselves, which they really can here. Thank you both. Back to you now. Any questions you might have for anybody in our panel?
Can I just ask, was there anything surprising in the results from the research that you felt that there was something that GDST could improve on, and are there any action points that have come out as a result of the research that is changing the way you approach this sort of academic approach going forward?
Two things, thank you for that. Two things that come to mind. The big surprise, I suppose, I think, that we've tried to reflect on and tried to go back and convene sort of focus groups of students from the GDST that were part of the survey, just to get a sense of what lies behind the answer. It was the just very low scores on respect for leadership or aspirations for leadership, and trying to unpack that. You know, is it, I mean, I glibly suggested it's because they look at male leaders and don't think much of them, but is there more to it? And is there more that we need to address? And the things that have been said by colleagues here resonate around the way that leadership gets addressed at schools like this. There's such a many-faceted aspect of things. But I think there's a lot of work we need to do to understand why there is such disrespect for leadership, more generally, not just among women, but generally. The thing that made us, I think about, right, what's our next sort of action coming out of this? It is in the relatively low scores that everyone measures, and we're not immune from it, in the GCSE years. And you think that we're unique as a country in the entire world, I think, in terms of having a battery of high-stakes tests at a time which is no longer the school leaving age. And you've got to ask why we go through it, why we put our students and our teachers. We try and have this mantra, don't we, that education isn't about exam results. Well, that's true until it is. And it is about exam results because students are measured by it, teachers are measured by it, schools are measured by it at age 16, which is ridiculous, given that there's another couple of years of formal secondary schooling before university. And I think what we need to do is to be brave enough as a group of schools to say, no, we're not going to play that game anymore. We haven't set those rules. This is a government thing, obviously. But universities don't require people to do 9, 10, 11 GCSEs. We should be trying to subvert the stranglehold that this battery of exams has. on the way that schools like this have to operate. They get around it in all sorts of ingenious ways, but I think the survey surprised us that it's still there as a major dip in confidence for everybody involved in it. It's not a system that we should be proud of.
On the back of that, if I can just add, sorry, and then come to you, Linda, one of the other things I noticed in the report was about, despite the girls being optimistic about the future, how prepared they felt with things like financial awareness and management and that side of things. And as a school, we've really addressed that. We are very lucky with a phenomenal careers advisor, phenomenal sixth form team, but doing things like networking events with the local Bath Business Women's Association is such a life skill. And the girls, you throw them in at the deep end. We were talking about improvisation. And in fact, you've done some stand-up comedy as well, haven't you?
Not personally, but
Did you
I've
steal
arranged
that?
it.
Did you steal that idea? But teaching girls that you can just drop yourself into things and you can cope with it. And actually, you can flourish whilst you do it. Those sorts of things. And I know that Melanie's now starting some of her stock market work, isn't she, with them?
Yeah, sort of virtual trading floors and responding to bits of the data whereby whilst there was still a healthy discrimination between girls and GDST girls, there's the trends are going in a direction we don't want them to, and trying to address that with financial literacy and sort of things like that. And with the networking, what's interesting, so anecdotally again, our prefect leaders who go to the sort of the training sessions for sort of the next wave and cohort of student leaders across sort of Bath, if slightly beyond our region of Somerset, they often come back again anecdotally, and they're amused and amazed by the behaviour of the girls from the co-ed schools around the tables who very politely conform to those tropes and listen slightly passively, slightly meekly until it's their turn to speak, and they're very happy to sort of metaphorically elbow themselves forward if they have something to say that's worth listening to. And I don't want to overstate that. I think our students carry humility and courtesy absolutely, and grace that comes in spades, but it's proactively trying to challenge that. The reason I share that is simply that Melanie's also arranged for a networking event at the summer term for our Year 12s with Kingswood boys as well. So I'm interested to see how our girls navigate that. And again, we don't exist in a convent. We're not a colony on Mars. I don't think our girls are going to be in a corner like a roller disco in Year 6. I think they're going to boss the room, and I really look forward to seeing that.
Lovely image. Convents and roller discos. Thank you for that.
Is this water?
Yes.
Question from the front, Linda.
Yeah, having worked at the Royal Hive for 23 years now, retired, I find it very interesting. And as Claire said, you can't just say to a child, be confident. You've got to be confident. You give them situations in which they can flourish. And I remember when those two joined as well, Poppy and Anya, I remember them, girls of that, they come in Year 7 from different places, and they would say, the good thing about here is you don't mind making a mistake. Nobody laughs at you when you get it wrong. And that resilience, that confidence to go forward, even if you're not 100% right, just do it. And I think that stands them in very good stead. And a friend of mine has just been recently to a very good co-ed independent school. She was giving a seminar and was struck yet again but how the boys did all the talking, not necessarily that much to say, and when they broke up into groups, a lot of chit-chat, girls did a lot of input, and the boys were the ones that actually fed back, stood up, and projected, even quite happy to borrow ideas. Would you say that was in line with your findings from different experiences?
Speaking to girls who come back to those things, absolutely. And if you go to student conferences, which we do, there are the gender conventions and they manifest and materialise in society. They play out, which is why we attack them, I think, to empower girls to be them. It's back to that authentic self. There's far greater diversity of individuals and human beings in a all-girls classroom, I think, funnily enough, than in a co-ed setting, because neither party, boy or girl, is under that pressure to be a certain person. And that plays out in STEM numbers at sixth form, more than half our girls taking maths in the sixth form, as well as just in their nature, in themselves, I think, very powerfully.
I was thinking about a meeting, not unlike this, a few months ago that I was at, and on the panel there was a Year 13 girl. And the last question of the evening was from someone who said, and looked directly at this Year 13 student and said, look, I've heard everything, I believe, I trust the research, I believe the anecdotes and things, I know what work you're doing. And she looked at the student and said, doesn't it worry you just a little bit that when you go to university in a few months' time, that'll be the first time you'll be in a co-ed environment? The answer she gave was just absolutely nailed it, astonishing. But the really good bit was the look she gave the questioner. It was just this look of complete incredulity. Why would you think that? But the answer she gave was exactly along the lines that we've heard. It was, the anecdote she gave was going to a careers day, an insight day at a merchant bank or something in London, and they were all students from all different schools, and she said she could tell the girls who were from co-ed schools because when they broke up into little workshops, those girls took a back seat in the discussion in terms of being assigned jobs and giving feedback. And this GDST student said, and she said it assertively but with humility, exactly as you've described. She said, the position I took was that until proven otherwise, I'm just as good as they are. And she behaved accordingly. And that's the kind of thing, to your point, you don't teach people that by just continually telling them that as a mantra. It's how teachers and colleagues operate that develops those sorts of dispositions grow because of the experience that girls have in schools like this, I think.
Thank you.
Players, not spectators.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've got time for one final question, but don't worry because we are going to then carry on if you want to back in the Rebecca Barrel rooms. Is there anything else that anyone wants to
One at the back
ask?
on the left.
I think it's Lou Scott.
Sunlight in the dark. Lou, welcome.
Yes.
Just building on your last point, I wonder how easy or difficult is it to extend the research into the alumni body? Because it's so nice to hear anecdotally, I felt empowered, I felt very comfortable and so on, but I think really powerful would be to see something quantitative as producing this research that finishes at 18, I think. Because I guess the girls who are answering those questions, they don't actually know the reality of the world that they're going to yet.
Yeah.
Whereas with hindsight and in retrospect, perhaps, 5 years out, 7 years out,
Yeah.
that would be really telling. I don't know, how easy is it?
It's difficult, but it's absolutely essential because that's the real proof, is how long does this last? And how does it set you up, not just for university, but for beyond? It's the longitudinal studies. There aren't many of them. The few that there are pretty convincing, but you're absolutely right, that's the next step.
I can give you my mini research on that. I mentioned this to one of the parents. One of those strange coincidences, when I started, I was coming to the Royal High School and it was a GDST school amongst my circle of girlfriends. They all went, oh, I went to one of those. And everyone apart from me had been to a GDPS, whatever it used to be called, school. Yes, with a P in there. And they decided the common denominator was that they were all still working and they were financially independent and they had been taught that from school. There was a doctor, there was a solicitor, there was a surveyor and an architect. And I thought, okay, it's a small bit of research. Yes. I didn't set out to do it, but there was the evidence. So I do think it'd be good to extend that.
And can I add to that? Am I right in naming you as an alumna yourself, Ms. Scott?
Yeah.
Who
We'll
feels
start
suitably
with you.
empowered to give Dr Stannard homework this evening? So I think that's what a perfect culmination of this journey.
So thank you very much to everyone who's joined us this evening. We believe so much in everything to do with girls. We're all about putting girls at the heart of everything we do. And it was reassuring what Kevin said because we know what works with girls. But it's lovely to then have that data, that information behind it that says, yes, it really is making a difference. And the GDST is all about reaching as many girls as possible, making that difference for the future generations. They are the change makers. You are the change makers. And it is so exciting and so reassuring to see the caliber, the quality, and the gentle confidence that these women take out into the world of work and beyond, wherever that may be. So thank you for all the insights we've had. Thank you for your questions. A particular thanks both to Anya and to Poppy. Again, fantastic bravery. Yeah, I'll come and do it. You're brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you. And as I said, we will head back now to the Rebecca Barrel room, so do join us for further refreshments and any further discussion that you want to have with us. But otherwise, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who's not able to join us, but has been able to watch the film. And we hope to see you again very soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.